In a previous video, I mentioned about how the Fujifilm cameras are so similar to the old Nikon style kind of SLRs. So I thought it'd be about right to compare the lenses and specifically stick myself a Nikon lens on my Fujifilm camera, see what happens. Welcome everybody, my name is John Sparkman, photographer, videographer down here in Birmingham in England. I've been shooting with Fujifilm for about a year now. Using the X-T3, then the X-T20 as well as a backup. You know, the reason why I got them instead of, say, a Sony or something was mainly because of the physical dials and the similarities to a camera I hold very dear to myself, the Nikon FM, specifically the one my dad gave me. And now this is battered and you can see the brass is rubbing off on it and big dent in the bottom and the kind of the leathery stuff's peeling off, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Does need another service though, the mirror on the inside is absolutely filthy. Before I can do anything else, we do need to have an adapter for this. My adapter of choice this time was a K&F Concept. It's a pretty sturdy little piece of metal here. There's no glass in the middle, there's no fanciness, it's got a Fujifilm kind of bayonet mount at the back, and then it's got the Nikon bayonet mount at the front, and they almost look identical. They've got the three little kind of ear bits to click into. It's a nice rotate. We've got ourselves a nice little kind of prime lens. Now, worth mentioning, remember that Fujifilm sensors are smaller than traditional full frame, which is the original kind of 35mm that would go through one of these old cameras. So although this is a 50mm, we actually kind of times it by about 1.5, comes out about 85mm, 1.8. Not too shabby, is it? And it really is quite compact. If you're looking for a decent kind of walkabout lens, a bit of a tighter one, if you're looking for one of those, this might actually be of an appeal to you. At the front you've just got a focusing ring, and on the top we've got it in feet, and then we've got it in meters, and there's a little infinity logo just at the top. Just behind that we've got some snazzily coloured kind of aperture settings. It goes from 1.8 all the way up to f/22. Of course you're going to go and have to shoot in manual mode on your cameras, so we just put it to M on the front of the Fujifilms. Then we can take advantage of the different varieties of kind of manual focus assist that we have. My personal favourite is to use the kind of, that's like an unsharp mask kind of, if you're used to Photoshop, where once you're in focus everything is super sharp and there's kind of a line around all the bits that are in focus. Fantastic ways to help you kind of see what's in focus or not. I'll tell you what, going to a mirrorless camera like this, on my old DSLRs, my old 6D and 70D, I wouldn't have been able to do this. As you might have been able to tell, I can't see very well. I don't have binocular vision, which means only one of my eyes work at any one time, and it's always the right hand one. So I cannot gauge depth very well. It's just something I can't do. I always miss it. And I've used manual focus lenses back in the day when I was a bit creative on the DSLRs, and I would always be slightly out of focus, and I would always try and use a really low aperture to be fancy, and yeah, it was just a recipe for disaster. So it's nice and smooth. It's got the minimum focusing distance of 45 centimeters, which is not too bad. I mean, you can always make it smaller by having kind of macro rings and all that kind of stuff, and then you actually start building out the lens and it becomes enormous at that point. But the real use of it is kind of as a portrait lens. You're talking 85mm realistically. Now, this old 50mm did used to have a lens hood. It was a rubber one. And I still have photos of my dad using it back in the day with that rubber one back in the 80s. I have since removed it because it cracked. It's old 40-year-old piece of rubber. You can still buy replacements online, but I mean, I would be favouring a metal one at this point. You might wonder why I've got this nice array of other lenses, and a 50mm 1.8 was very similar to the kind of the holy portrait lens from Fujifilm, the 56 1.2. Now, removing this kind of lens hood, this chunky little thing has almost the same focal range. It's twice the size, and it's £700 minimum as well. Obviously you're going to get things that you can't get with this vintage lens. You're going to get the 1.2. This is your working lens. This is what you do commercially, for business, for money. or if you want those super pin sharp photos. But if you're of that era who like the Petzval lenses and a little bit of blurriness, maybe you've just inherited a load of Nikon lenses from someone, just want to try them out. A cheap old adapter is absolutely fine. You've seen on my channel before, I used to use a Helios lens with an adapter. That was superb as well. Shooting with video as well for one of these is actually pretty handy. Typically you'll be shooting video with kind of manual focus lenses when you go onto tripods and doing interviews and stuff. This might just make a really interesting quality lens, how it renders the background, how it blurs it out, bokeh. It's a very simplistic kind of stylized prime lens. The biggest thing I find about using a Nikon or any manual focus lens, to be fair, on such an advanced piece of kit as a Fujifilm, it really slows you down. And I feel that I'm talking slower today and more calm just because I'm discussing it. But it is true. When you have almost these limitations and restrictions on your shooting because you have to manually compose and because you have to focus and then choose your aperture slowly, it makes you think, it makes you more selective, it hones you down to what you like, instead of kind of having a all singing all dancing, very utilitarian digital lens like the 18-55 or this 55mm prime lens. Those you can just blast and go focus, 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 focus. This you consider, and I did actually find myself only taking about 20 photos when I was out in a space of 2 or 3 hours. Just having a browse around on eBay at recently sold AIS lenses. This is the AIS, not a G or any of those. 50mm, we're looking at about £80, £50, you know, relatively cheap for kind of what you're getting at, and these will all be in fantastic condition. In an ideal world, I'd love to get myself the 1.4, the 1.2 equivalent, but then again at that stretch, why don't I just go and get myself a Nikon F3, and then why don't I go and get myself another Hasselblad? I'm working with what I've been given, I'm using them for creative tools. I probably wouldn't use this commercially, or if I needed critical focus, I would definitely rely on newer lenses at that point, but at least it's something interesting, and it may spike your creativity, it may make you want to do something more interesting and just get out. You know, we need a bit of exercise at this time in 2020. We're all stuck inside in a little studio like this. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed shooting with analog stuff, so I'm actually going to start a series about analog photography, film cameras, going through kind of the experiences and my tenure with it. As some of you may know, I spent 6 years working in a printing lab, part-time, full-time, part-time, printing in excess of 3 million photos. In that era, film was starting to fade out, digital was coming in, but I was still doing 20, 30 films a day. And my boss, fortunately, was so kind to actually let me develop any film I had for free. So I got a lot of time in, I got a lot of films put through lots of different film cameras. So I hope in the future I'm going to be able to impart that knowledge onto YouTube. If you like it, stick around, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.